I think he will do a great job as Secretary of Defense, and I think in his confirmation hearings, all of these issues that you've raised, that others have raised, he'll be prepared to deal with. I've read some of the responses that he's already put together, and I think he will make a very, very spirited defense of his position, and I think it'll be confirmed.
Let's bring in Manu Raju, senior congressional reporter for Politico, and Meredith Shiner, congressional reporter for Roll Call. Good Sunday to both of you. Meredith, you know, I was reading one of your recent articles. It read, has Kirk's office been running a secret anti-Hagel campaign? You're talking about Mark Kirk out of Illinois. When we look at the situation right now, how much weight could an endorsement like Colin Powell's be for Hagel, a Republican here, when he's pushing forward this candidate, despite some of the contentious discussion so far, even as you were writing, a fellow Republican not liking Hagel at the moment?
Well, yes, and I think that you're right, Richard, in saying that this has been a bit of a contentious nomination that the president has made, but it's going to be very, very difficult to see how a bloc large enough to basically filibuster this nomination will emerge. There's been some speculation that prominent Jewish Democratic senators like Chuck Schumer could potentially get in the way of this nomination. I think what you'll see is a hearing process at the committee level with difficult questions. You'll see floor speeches that question Mr. Hagel's commitment to Israel or his commitment to Iranian sanctions. But I think in a lot of ways the Republican critique of his nomination comes sort of as a general critique of his position when he came out after having voted originally for the Iraq War as a significant questioner of the Iraq War, and also just an ally of the president. So in a lot of ways, for the Republicans, this has been one of another proxy battles with President Obama, and is as much about their feelings about him as it is about their feelings about Chuck Hagel.
Well, and those feelings also come from the left, as you were talking about. Manu, listen to this.
I am not comfortable yet. I want to ask him questions about those two issues.
All right, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal with that statement there. And you know, as you were writing as well, Manu, you said, as Chuck Schumer goes, so goes Hagel.
That's right. I mean, Chuck Schumer is probably the most important voice in this debate on the Democratic side right now. Really, the only way that Chuck Hagel doesn't get confirmed right now is if Democratic senators come out in opposition to him. There's going to be a block of Republican senators who will vote against Hagel for the reasons you've mentioned, but they will not have enough support to sustain a filibuster.
Do you think Schumer or Blumenthal will go against this nomination? Do you think they'll not vote for their president?
I think it's unlikely at this point. Chuck Hagel will have to really assure both Schumer, Blumenthal, other Jewish Democrats, other pro-Israel Democrats, that he would be a staunch advocate for Israel, and I'm sure he will do that. If he slips up in any way in the hearings, or if a lot of these groups off of the Hill that are very influential try to derail Hagel's nomination after the hearings, it would be very hard for some of these Democrats to vote for him. Absent that, though, I think his confirmation is assured, but Hagel has some work to do, and it starts with selling himself to Democrats on the Hill.
Let's change subjects to Afghanistan. That came up throughout this week, a little bit later in the week, and I want to play a little bit of sound here from retired Army General Stanley McChrystal. Take a listen to this here.
I have a lot of feelings about what happened, but the most is that responsibility is key, and there's no point in finger pointing. I'm not sure Washington needs another book like that. I have regrets that some of the things that I was responsible for I didn't finish. I didn't finish the job in Afghanistan.
Meredith, what's your thought here? What lessons do you think Congress will take away from this war, especially those who were headstrong about going into it at the start?
Well, I think that it shows how complicated it is to fight long-term wars in the current world that we live in. I mean, this has been going on now for more than a decade, and it's created complicated regional issues that we obviously didn't understand clearly at the onset. Most people weren't concerned when we went into Afghanistan that we were doing the right thing, particularly in the wake of 9/11. But war is complicated, and I think you'll see these conversations, as you had mentioned, as the Senate tries to confirm Chuck Hagel. You look at the kind of outside influences that weigh into these debates, and Manu had mentioned this, that all of these outside forces on the Hill could put pressure on these members, which is sort of to the point that got Chuck Hagel under fire in the first place. One of the more controversial remarks that he made was a statement about AIPAC, in which he probably should have referred to it as the Israel lobby, but referred to it as the Jewish lobby, and how members respond to that and how they sort of craft their views on policy on that. And so you have all of these things that we see in Washington, whether it's outside groups or allegiances among lawmakers. But at the end of the day, people tend to line up behind the president, particularly in issues of foreign policy, when serious matters like deciding to go to war or imposing sanctions on other countries are concerned, because you have to demonstrate some sort of unity in terms of a coherent foreign policy in the united front.
Meredith,
in these battles.
Manu, stick around. We'll be speaking with you again next hour, later this hour, rather, so look forward to that conversation. Former President George H.W. Bush could leave the hospital early this week. The latest on the elder Bush's condition, that's coming up, plus heavy fighting and airstrikes around Damascus. What's happening with the Syrian civil war and what it means for the United States, that's ahead. And later, one former first daughter thinks the depiction of family life inside the White House on the new show 1600 Penn is way off. We'll tell you who's speaking out coming up on MSNBC.